Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action. Allen.
Deep downfield. Wide open.
Welcome into a new edition of the Going Deep podcast, special Tuesday, August 2nd edition. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Masseri, here with Mike Bunt to break down the first week plus of training camp. Got a lot to get into. We got some Jordan Poyer injury. We got some scuffles. We got some DB battles, some really cool things developing at the DB spot. A lot more interesting than I thought it would be coming in, to be honest. Mike, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I wish I didn't have to talk about a Jordan Poyer injury today, but other than that, enjoyed camp once again on Saturday. Excited about going to the stadium on Friday night. Just beautiful evening, good times, enjoying all this camp coverage.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot to get into. There's just always eking with news. At first, last week, it was the Micah Hyde injury. He's already back in the fold. There's not even anything really to discuss on that front, but then the other safety. So we're going to start there, Mike, with the news of the Jordan Poyer injury. I kind of want to get into that. The hyperextended elbow arm, looking like to be a 2-week injury. So the Bills have looked to avoid potentially a hip pointer and an extended elbow arm injury on both of their safeties. And that's supposed to be probably out of the preseason, which, you know, I know someone like you don't mind that for maybe something more serious, but you have Jordan Poyer back in the fold, which looks to be, by all accounts, a month plus away, should be in well spirits and maybe even get some availability late in the preseason. So, Mike, the Bills probably dodged a bullet there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you get good news about an injury, you're lucky. There was fear when this originally happened. People were mentioning how he looked like he was in a lot of pain, and there was some worry among fans that, is our star all-pro safety going to be down for a period of time? But to happen now, to only miss a few weeks, the preseason, and then most likely be back for the regular season, that's not the biggest hit in the world. And if anything, now you get to see some of the depth behind him more close, which is something that can be a positive in time if something were to happen to Jordan Poyer during a regular season game. So, yeah, you don't want to see anybody get hurt, especially in training camp or the preseason, but the timing is better now than later during camp or later during the regular season.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. Like, you look around Broncos camp and they lost 2 players to injuries, IR for the season. Tim Patrick is actually a contributor on that team. So there's things that could always be worse, suffering from a torn ACL. All the receivers seem to have torn ACLs there in Denver. But that's a brutal stretch. I mean, a developing guy under Russell Wilson, and that's kind of what you're trying to avoid. And I'll read you Adam Schefter's tweet. Jordan Poyer hyperextended his elbow today and will miss what seems to be a few weeks, in quotations. Poyer is expected to be back for the start of the regular season. So that's about as good of news as you can get, considering what's going on across the league and what can go on. So, they dodged a bullet. They're able to kind of develop that safety play. I'm really interested to see what the Bills have at safety. That's always been a unit to me that is very strong, but only because of the 2 players. So
we've never really seen the depth behind them. Not too much Hamlin, not too much Johnson. So this is going to be fun. I mean, let's see what these guys have. And just one more thing about the injury. During camp, we always freak out. Oh my God, is he okay? What's happening? Shut down practice right now. It's no different than what happens during practice during the regular season. The only difference is we have all of our eyeballs on it, so we can see these guys going down. We worry, we panic. guys get hurt all the time in football. Just what happens during the regular season, which is when it's closed off to the public, closed off to media segments, you're not going to obviously have that reaction because you're not seeing it. When it happens in front of you and you see the pain, sometimes agony, stuff like that, it's more personal. But sometimes we overhype these injuries as they happen. Thankfully, this Jordan Poyer situation isn't as serious as originally thought.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you have some injuries on the O-line, but outside of that, knock on wood, I'm not superstitious. I'm sorry, but the Bills aren't very injured right now. So, you know, you had the injury bullets dodged. You have Trey White was seemingly in good shape. The Bills are in decent shape right now. I mean, just call it what it is for just as I read, like the Broncos having those injury issues right now, going 2 players out for the year today. You know, you take what you can't just come out with 90 non-injured players. So Mike, I think that they have a recipe for success. These morning practices, one of the best rehab facilities in the NFL, along with, quite frankly, if the Bills see stuff that's not looking right or like players are going down for the day, they will like close down. I've seen it happen. When I covered the team a few years ago, I've watched McDermott in person do it. When I was credentialed, that he just straight up closed it 45 minutes early. And I remember asking, I believe it was Nate Geary at the time, like, what are the fans? Like, the fans came here and missed like half the practice. So he will do that. So to me, I think they run a good, clean ship. That's why the injuries are down. And quite frankly, you know, I'll take it. And I want to see as much to kind of finish off the safety room, though. I want to see as much Johnson and Hamlin as possible. I'd even go as far as saying don't play Poyer all preseason, even if he's ready, and play Hyde very little, like to start the game series, get him out. There's no reason why you can't see what Hamlin and Johnson can do with a few reps or more, a few, you know, even call it series with this starting defense. So I do think that that'll only benefit you long-term, and put them both in there and see who's doing what, see, you know, what's going on, switch them and mix and match and play a little Josh Thomas. You know, if you're going to play any of the corners at safety, this is when I want to see it. So I do believe that there's some good to come out of a short-term injury. And that's kind of what I want to see as we approach preseason in 11 days, seemingly. So there's good stuff to come out of the safety room, but Mike, staying on the DBs, got to start with the cornerback room here and how competitive it's been. I've heard about all of them making the team at this point. I think I've heard every single player on the team, from Tim Harris to the newly signed Jordan Miller to Nick McLeod. Cam Lewis has moments. Saran Neal. We're just talking about the backups here. Elijah Griffin, Christian Benford. Mike, there's a lot of talent here, and this is definitely a unit that I could foresee there being a waiver claim on when the Bills do have to make the roster cut downs. What's kind of your early interpretation from the cornerback room with all of this information, where Brandon Beane was on Sirius XM radio today, basically pumping some of these guys up? What do you take away from that?
My takeaway is that your number one corner is hurt, not able to practice, and you are trying to find out who has the ability to step up if needed. So why not test all of these guys out to see who has the ability to play significant reps if their name is called? And even for some of the guys lower on the depth chart, see what they can do in situations that they might see the field. So the story today and yesterday was that Christian Benford is getting some reps with the number ones. That's encouraging to see. A 6th-round draft pick getting an opportunity and having some success early on in his first camp with the Bills. So that's something I'm happy to see. You're hearing good reports about Nick McLeod forcing some takeaways during practice. Cam Lewis had a good practice last week where he had a couple breakups, back-to-back plays. Dane Jackson, you're not hearing anything really negative about him, which I would take away as a positive, assuming that he's going to be probably your number 2 corner day one, assuming that Trey White is out some period of time, which I did hear someone on WGR the other day, a reporter saying that he thought Trey's injury will probably go into the regular season from some of the things he was hearing from the Bills. I haven't heard anything like that yet, so I'm still not going to assume that's the case, but that's the first time I was really hearing someone in the know say that the Bills didn't expect him right away. But I'm encouraged. So far, you're seeing a lot of inexperienced guys get a bunch of reps during Bills camp, and it seems like most of them are holding their own to this point in camp. The question being, are they holding their own because they're doing great at this point, good at this point, or is it a factor that the Bills' starting offense has been missing many linemen? They're getting the defensive line is getting a lot of pressure, and you're also trying to transition into a slightly different offense, and maybe they're off the mark a little bit. So encouraged, but also want to take everything with a grain of salt at this point.
Did that reporter mention just said wouldn't be ready for week 1, or?
I think it was Sal Marana from the DNC. So I don't know 100%. It was 2-3 minutes when I was listening to GR, and I just heard a passing reference saying the Bills thought he wouldn't be ready for the beginning of the season. But the Bills are a tight ship. I honestly don't believe they're sharing that information with a local reporter. Just the way things normally go at One Bills Drive, it's normally the national guys that break anything significant
through the agent. Yeah.
Even Ian Rappaport was the person that released the news today originally about Jordan Poyer getting an MRI. Adam Schefter, the first one to release the information about Jordan Poyer being out a few weeks. So take the Trey White news with a grain of salt that I mentioned from listening on the radio, but it would make sense a little bit that they're testing out all these corners, because week 1 you're going up against Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. You're going to need some of these guys, unproven talent, to step up, or it could be a long defensive day if you're getting burnt by Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp. You're going to have guys like Kyer Elam, Dane Jackson, a lot of younger guys that have not gone up against that skill level in the NFL at this point.
Yeah, and to quickly address, how does the scrimmage game work? Is it offense versus defense? Yes. First team, second team. It's kind of like, if you watch college, it's kind of like their spring game in a way. That's kind of like how it works. You kind of have like the blue and the white team, or blue and red. That's what they call it, blue and red. So usually it's color based, and it's based on offense, defense. That's kind of how they do it. So it's just basically different units play against each other for a series of plays, whatever the defined amount of time is. It can range from one quarter to 5 series, to a couple different ways that you can do it. But that's generally how the scrimmage works. I believe, Mike, you have tickets for it, right? You'll be there and kind of giving us live updates.
I'll be there. I'll be tweeting what I can. I'm going to be going with my wife, so that takes me a little bit away from the phone. If I tweet too much, I'm going to get in the doghouse with her. So I try to pay a little bit of attention to her, a little bit to the social media and everything like that. But I'm excited. I love being at the stadium. I don't care if it's practice, game, anything. It's always great being at Highmark Stadium, the Ralph, Ritz Stadium, New Era, whatever you want to call it. It's a sign that football season is finally back, and the games are almost here.
Yep, August 5th, that scrimmage will take place. They probably do some warm-ups. Mike will be there to get you ready for it. The official time on that, it looks like gates open at 4. I don't know what time.
I think it's 5:30. I think practice starts at 5:30. Pretty early, kind of odd with that. But as we've seen with Bills camp in Rochester, this regime really doesn't care about being in prime time. They more so just get the practices underway. Don't worry about how much hype, publicity. Just get them under wraps and try to get through them without anybody getting hurt.
Okay, because you have so I would say about 6, probably by the time they're warmed up, good to go. I would say probably around 6 o'clock, 5:30 to 6 o'clock here on Friday, to get going on that. So as we kind of think about this preseason and the expectations, and we've had an defensive expectation show, and we kind of just dabbled at the DB unit a little bit there to start the show, just kind of all the safety injury news and kind of the progression of the corner room. And I'll be honest, I ruled out Benford from the start because I didn't really think there was a path to the roster, especially if these reports of Trey White not being ready week 1 is even close to true. Someone like Benford has a role on the team. Now, by all accounts, Brandon Beane has mentioned a couple of these DBs that he really likes, McLeod and Benford specifically. When your GM calls you out like that, there's some good signs that the team is looking forward to keeping you on the roster. And if you need to keep players, especially with a hurt Trey White or a coming back Trey White, I've always been a proponent of the roster him, see what he can do week one, even in a limited basis, but have backfill and don't play him an entire workload. I'm a proponent of that, to kind of get him in, get him game ready, and monitor him just like you would with a third down pass rusher or limited touch running back. I would like to see him get back in the game flow and in certain down and distances play Trey White. So to me, it's a matter of, I would stash heavy, long-winded way to say I would stash heavy at the DB unit, because quite frankly, I think the talent's there. You have Cam Lewis, a guy that's been in on first and second team units, who's been good. He has some special teams ability. He's kind of homegrown through UB, through kind of risen the ranks of the practice squad. He's a guy right in the mix of things. You obviously have Saran Neal, a practice squad, special teams all-star, a guy that they designated as, they paid him a little bit more than you would just for a special teamer. They do think that there's more there. I don't personally see the defensive prowess from him. I think we've given him more than enough opportunities, and he struggled as a backup corner to really rely on more than on special teams. And then you have guys like I mentioned, Benford and McLeod, who they're really pushing for a roster spot. And I like their potential enough to where McLeod's already been claimed. So to think he wouldn't be claimed again, unless he goes and tanks this preseason and or gets hurt, I would like to think that he would be in the running to be claimed. So you might not have a whole lot of options there with him. You've liked what you've seen so far out of Tim Harris. I've heard a lot about Tim Harris at times. So what's he going to be? He's maybe a guy you are hoping that makes it to the practice squad, even at his more vet level age. And then we haven't even mentioned yet, obviously, the three starters with Elam, Taron Johnson, and Dane Jackson. So we haven't even mentioned much about Dane Jackson, who apparently the regime trusts and could be day one starter based on everything going on. So it's a pretty decent unit, and I'll admit that Brandon Beane did pretty well to address those cornerback concerns this year. I didn't think he'd sink that kind of investment in Elam into it. Elam struggled at times already, but he's starting to find his footing as to be expected. So he's up against one of the best offenses in the NFL. You would expect him to struggle at times, especially against an offensive line who's struggling against this vaunted D-line who they've had to sit at Oliver for wrecking the game, Mike. As we kind of transition from the cornerback room and how strong that is, and we're going to get into that more in the preseason. I'm going to need a preseason game and at least the scrimmage from the field on Friday to get a little bit more into how comfortable I feel with keeping 7 corners or whatever. We got to talk about the defense as a whole and how good the D-line has been. And just quite frankly, they might have finally, after a few iterations, they may have finally found the mixture to the potion that might work, Mike, between the vets and the youth. How are you feeling about how Ed Oliver's shown up? Daquan Jones has been in and out with injuries, but, Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, you have Boogie Basham, you have AJ Epinesa showing out, obviously Von Miller, Gregory Rousseau, Shaq Lawson, Brandon Bryant has shown some good moments. Could he be the final piece to the roster? He's had some really good moments here in camp. How are you feeling about what's seeming me? And then I read and watched how good Mike Love has played. So you have a really good group of D-line that they've kind of between homegrown and adding Von Miller and then adding some DTs. Mike, how are you feeling about this unit finally after 4 tries coming together?
I'm pumped for this unit, and it's one of the parts of the field that I'm most excited for heading into this season. It's not like they were awful last year. Bill's defensive line was decent in 2021, but there's so many good pieces right now, and you're really expecting an emergence from Ed Oliver. He was great in the second half of last season, but I think the expectation now is that is going to be the new norm for him going forward. You're talking a contract year. Ed Oliver is going out there hoping to feast. He wants his money. He knows what D linemen get paid right now in the NFL, and he's seeking that $100 million plus. I guarantee you, he wants his bag of cash. And with Von Miller next to him and the relationship that they're forming, I think Ed Oliver is going to be a scary guy for most offensive linemen to face next year. Mitch Morse has already talked about it, that when you have Von and Ed next to each other, It's dynamic. It's hard to stop. And that doesn't even factor in guys like Groot on the opposite side of the line, who had a solid rookie year, great against the run, filling out and making that sophomore leap. Daquan Jones, what's his impact going to be? Tim Settle, we haven't really even seen him yet for the most part, outside of the one interception I believe he had during camp, which is kind of funny. But the starters should definitely be an upgrade. But it's nice that they have this quality depth where you take these guys out and you don't expect – obviously, there's going to be a drop-off, but hopefully nothing major. And you're talking about guys like Shaq Lawson, Jordan Phillips. It just goes on and on. Boogie Basham, A.J. Epineza. Epineza's a guy you're hoping to step up. But you go through all these names, and there's a lot of quality players on this roster. I expect the first unit to be a strength of this defense. And like I said, it's great to have the depth to where – they should be well rested and should be able to maintain a high level of play whenever they're counted upon.
Absolutely. And I think this D-line app is what brings the heat. It's what's going to settle the difference between the Bills walking off last year and with a win and not. Like, quite frankly, we talk about this all the time. You can blame the special teams blunder. You can blame this. You can blame that. But just quite frankly, the Bills went in. I'll tell you what they blamed. Yes, they fired the special teams coach, but they went and said, got to get after the quarterback. We need to change some things. We weren't able to get Mahomes even the drive prior. And what did they do? They went and addressed the D-line and then needed to get another corner in the room and a couple corners even to kind of combat what the Chiefs team speed, which is hopefully reduced and does level the playing between what the Bills were able to do with Von Miller and what they were able to do with hopefully with Elam. And then you add in the fact of losing Tyreek Hill, and you might have that evening of the ship there. But from all accounts and from everything I've watched, from everything I've read, from everything that I've listened to, the Bills defense is legit and might be every bit the part of an actual number one defense and not kind of that, well, they got gashed against Indy. Well, they got gashed in the wind. Yes, both of those did happen. And some of that was rain and wind. You got to be good in those elements because that costs you home field.
We've been talking about that, Kev. We've been talking about that on our show all offseason where, yes, they were number one in a bunch of categories last year, but this is a more complete defense overall. Might not show up at the end of the year when you're looking at, are they number one, number two, number three? Who knows where they're going to finish in terms of rankings and those categories. But when they need a sack, when they need to get a pressure, can they generate it? Can they get a stop when it's required, whether that be a pass breakup on 3rd and 6 or a run stop on 3rd and 1 where a team is trying to go up the middle. They have on paper the answers to defend against almost anything. I do like the comment from Spin. Oliver is going up against the weakest part of the offensive line. Yes, it's not like Oliver is going up against a great Bills offensive front right now with all the guys that are missing and have been out. But that's what you expect. If he's going to be out there, you expect him to do that against the offensive lineman, and he's coming through. In the past, we've had those expectations for certain players, and they don't perform when they're playing mediocre talent. Oliver seems to be focused and set on, like I said, having a big season. I think Von Miller as a mentor on this squad is going to do incredible things for this defensive line unit in terms of they already know how to win. Like, this Bills organization has been winning games for years, but to get over that hump and just the things about developing into the men that they need to be on and off the field to be successful, I'm very encouraged. And you can even go back to the Aaron Donald effect. Aaron Donald is unstoppable regardless of who you put around him. But then you put Von Miller there, and that Rams defense is ferocious. Ed Oliver isn't an Aaron Donald, but Ed Oliver is a very good player. Yeah, Von Miller absolutely. Next to Ed Oliver, you add in the secondary, some of the talent you have at the linebacking core. This is a complete unit, and they're going to be dangerous this season.
And I don't think that anyone, like, at least I don't think that, I don't care if Ed Oliver's going against, Greg Van Roten anybody in the backup unit, if you're moving inside Bobby Hart, no matter what it is that you're doing, Ed Albert needs to feast in those situations to the point where they need to sit him down so that the offense can get done some of the things that they need to get done. And if that's what it continues to be, I do believe Brandon Beane's work on the phone for some interior offensive linemen pretty quickly. If it's not getting done, I guess it's easy to say when you're missing your starting guards, but at the end of the day, we'll see if there's anything that needs to be done there in the interior offensive line that I'm keeping my pretty close eye on. Also wanted to, if anybody had what I wanted to do for the preseason too, if anyone has any ideas, I wanted to bring on some guests coming up here in the next couple of weeks to kind of get their takes on their teams. I was going to try to correlate to the preseason opponents, but then I'm like, does that really matter? I don't really care about the preseason opponents. So if you guys have any ideas on who you'd like to see in here, like Bills, if you'd rather have Bills people, if you like people from around the league, national people, let me know. And we're going to wanting to build out for late August, kind of build out the show schedule as kind of locking in those final guests through the regular season. So let me know what you'd rather see come on the show with us. As pretty good guest lineup that I always like to shout out. And I have to say, please get out there, check out the new Cover 1 Pass. It's amazing. You get super good content, as good as anywhere, with Greg Vorse and Kyle Salagi and Foxy and a bunch of other great, Ryan Sullivan, Rob Quinn, lots of great writers on our team now with really good Bills content. And obviously that's not even including the podcasters, Eric Turner, everybody knows those names. And we appreciate everybody for tuning into this small little fan site that I wanted to appreciate everybody for sticking with us. And, it means a lot that we have this kind of following and this kind of viewership of our shows in general, and the Cover 1 Podcast Network, which is doing good, big things from the Air Raid Hour to Cover 1 Buffalo to pretty much all of our show, the Roundup, pretty much all of our shows that we have here on the Cover 1 Network. So we really appreciate all of you for tuning in, and check out One Pass. You get a cool shirt and you get a cool access to the Slack channels, as well as many other things. Like and subscribe to, and 5 stars on Apple Podcasts means a whole lot for us as we kind of look at this, Mike. And now we're talking about the defensive line, and we're talking about how good that's been. And as we kind of break it down a little bit and kind of start to analyze it, what's your opinion on the defensive line getting a little bit of scrappy? As we talk about turning up the heat on this episode, we got some tiffs. We have to talk about some kerfuffles between the D-line and some interesting players, and Josh Allen at times putting his head in there to not really like what Jordan Phillips was about, to playing dead at one point on a specific quarterback run that he had, which was I watched the video and I'm still confused by that. But Mike, are you, and then people are on all sides. I wasn't even aware that people are on all sides of the fence on this. Where do you stand on the practice pushes, scuffles, face mask pulls? Are you like good? Are you like bad? Are you like, or are you going to pull me to one of those? I don't care.
I mean, I really don't have a strong opinion either way.
It is.
I don't mind them. I don't mind a fight here or there, as long as you're not being stupid and punching a helmet with your bare fist. You don't want somebody to break their hand or something just due to a stupid moment where they get heated. But I don't mind a fight every once in a while if it's controllable and not something that's an all-out craziness. What happened with Josh Allen and Jordan Phillips was nothing wild, nothing crazy. When I first saw it at camp, it generated obviously a reaction. You're not used to a quarterback, of a franchise quarterback, that is, getting up and shoving a defensive lineman in the face. So that's definitely a rarity and something that draws your attention. But seeing the replay, it really wasn't anything serious. Phillips should know better than to hit Allen late, which he did, or hit him at all in that situation. But can understand D lineman end of practice, probably a little annoyed and letting out a little bit of energy, anger, and Allen going back. You know what? Stand up for yourself. You don't like it, tell him how you feel. And and it was pretty minor after that. Obviously, Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs jumping on a pile, but it was mostly just mean words at that point. And if that heats them up, gets them going, I'm all for it. And I missed the little kerfuffle later in the week. But yeah, as long as the players are tame and they don't do anything wild, I'm okay with it. Sometimes those are the things that can rile you up, but it all depends on the situation. Obviously, some camp fights are justified, and then some are a sign of bad relationships and other problems that might be present on a team. So it's all dependent on the situation. With the culture Buffalo has established, I'm going to tend to believe that most of these fights are minor instances and nothing to really be worried about.
Yeah. I mean, I don't ever think that they're a big deal. I think that if you're a competitor and you care, you're not best friends with 90 players, heck, half of them don't make the team, almost half. There's no way that you can't not be feisty and that you can't not be getting involved and heated and being in the moment. Like, as an athlete myself, and I've played different levels of a couple of different sports, dude, I played very high level soccer, my whole career. And I would argue the refs more than anybody because, quite frankly, I was that much of a competitor. And I would always get into it with the other team's defense. I was a forward in soccer, and I would always get into it with their other defenders and goalies. So it's the same thing. Like, especially in a sport where half these dudes aren't making your team, and you're actually physically connecting with them, you're bound to have some type of interaction. And I only think that brings out more teamhood. It brings out, like, when this happens in a game, you're not going to pull away. I forgot, I think it was Zay Jones. I can't remember who it was who was starting to pull guys away and not letting retaliation. This year, I don't care. As long as it's not the NF or the AFC championship game, dude, let your offensive lineman take a 15-yard penalty if they need to. Do not touch the quarterback. The Bills have one way to really derail the season, and that's to have their quarterback hurt. I need my offensive linemen, my running backs, my receivers scrapping if they have to, if someone even comes close to taking a cheap shot on your quarterback. Just absolutely, I don't want any questions. That there is no issue, and I will defend that person for sticking up for their teammate, especially when it comes to your quarterback and others. So that'll never be an issue. Like, a boneheaded move is never defending your team. That is never a boneheaded penalty, in my opinion. If it costs you a game, that costs you home field, okay, like, there's definitely something to be said for that if they got into your head. But outside of very circumstantial things, I always want these guys, and this is just practice for the regular season, what literally training camp is. And I want to see that ability to defend your team, because that's only going to help you in the battles later on in January.
And McDermott would acknowledge that as well. He's even said, I'd rather have my team show off a little bit of feistiness and battle. That shows that they care. That shows that they're emotionally into what the product they're putting out on the field. And that's encouraging to hear that from a coach, and not just say, well, don't take the penalty. Obviously, there's situations where you gotta be smart, and you can't do something boneheaded, like in a tight game late in the fourth quarter. You don't want to take the penalty then. But there's situations where, it's okay to let a little frustration out, or even some gamesmanship. When Josh Allen spun the ball, McDermott went up to him and he joked about it. Like, I love it that you have that in you. And as long as they're letting it out and it's not a vicious or detrimental thing to themselves, I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's straight up all that needs to be said. Like, sure, there is like certain instances that can absolutely crush your team, but a lot of the times I think it's only a testament of your team actually being involved and caring about that play, or an unwritten rule on why Jordan Phillips so close to him, like whatever the case might be. I don't think that that's only helps the team atmosphere and the team experience, because quite frankly, there were games, as we see here on the screen, there were games that they just didn't look like it really mattered. Like Tennessee, yes, Josh Allen slipped, still got controlled at the line of scrimmage. Jacksonville just straight up looked like the team was like, meh, we'll win in the final. Josh Allen's on the field, we'll win the last series. And it just never happened. And
we don't even have Indy on that. So that's another game in addition to the New England Monday night.
Yeah,
game.
the New England and the Indy games were a little weirder, weather elements, just a super weird game. The Tennessee and Jacksonville games are games the Bills just straight up should have won. New England, like, I don't know, that win's crazy. I don't know what that was just super weird. And that Indy game was actually pretty weird too, with sideways rain wind. You just get some of those in Orchard Park. So I would like to see them play a little bit better in that situation. The New England game, I thought they played fine. One long run they let up and just couldn't convert in the red zone. It was what it was. And the true teams that came out later on in the season absolutely buried them twice, in the two more important games. But would like to see them come back a little bit better in that Indy game, because that's still could be a pretty big competitor for the team this year. Offensively, we had some questions about the running back room, and it is a good question because I had jotted down in my notes to make sure we talked about a couple of points here, Mike. And I want to know your opinion on a running back rotation. I wrote down here that the Bills should try to utilize a featured back with a little bit of rotation. I don't like heavy running back rotations. I never have. I think Devin Singletary played really well late in the year because there really wasn't a rotation, and I thought the team played better. I think that's the kind of style Aaron Kromer plays to. I think you call plays in the passing game with a receiving running back, totally cool with a third down back, and as a running back needs a breath. But as far as like the 50-50 splits, I just hate it. Do you like the 50-50 splits? Do you want one of these guys to take over, Mike, at the running back room?
It depends how you talk about a 50-50 split. Like, I don't think you're going to see a 50-50 split carrying the ball, but you might have a 50-50 split in terms of how they're used. So, like, if you ask me right now, like, give a percentage breakdown, how do you see the carries going this year? And I'm not including Josh Allen in the run plays for this part of the conversation because we know he's going to get his carries throughout. I would say 60% of the carries are probably going to be Singletary, maybe 30% Cook, and then 10% for whoever the number 3 running back is, whoever that is, whether Duke Johnson, Zach Moss, someone else making it later in the season, emerging. I think Singletary is the best runner on this team. He lacks the explosive burst, but he has vision. He sees the holes, and he's elusive, and he has the experience. I think Singletary is going to be that guy. Obviously, with James Cook, you're going to need him to run the ball sometimes. He can't just be a pass catcher out of the backfield because then he's not going to be effective, and the Bills are going to get blitzed all day. Early signs with him as a pass blocker is that he's actually done okay so far in camp, which is an encouraging early sign. But I see Cook more so getting a split. He's going to get some carries, maybe 6-7 carries a game, something like that. But he's going to get his touches out of the backfield as a receiver. And one guy that we have talked a little bit about this offseason, you're not high on him, and obviously the fan base isn't high on him, but Sal Capaccio actually had a positive tweet about him recently, was Zach Moss. And Sal said that Zach Moss was doing a great job in pass protection and that it looked like he had a little bit extra step so far in training camp. I do not think the Bills are done with Moss yet. I believe a third-round pick is something that's hard to give up on entering a third year in the NFL. And I know they brought in some competition with Duke Johnson, and you got Blackshear, who's a good practice squad candidate, and you have Tywan Jones on special teams. But I think Zach Moss still has a chance to make this team, and his pass protection is a plus. Obviously, I'm not expecting him to carve out a big role, but I am encouraged that it seems like he is stepping up to the challenge so far during camp.
Yeah. Not a Zach Moss guy. There's no reason to belabor
that point.
We know. To belabor that point. I just think he doesn't do anything particularly well, but I'm willing to see. I'm willing to buy in if he does stuff well in training camp and earn that final running back spot.
He's probably your best guy at the goal line if you're going to.
Hopefully. They tried it out for years, and it just never was that advantageous. Like you would think he is, but the stats don't show it. So we'll have to see like what what he turns into. I'm going to give him a year. I'm going to give him one final. This is it, though. Like, if he comes in and can't beat out Duke Johnson.
He's really not a horrible pass catcher either. So he does offer some positives if he's ever in a game. He can catch the ball. He can pass protect. And he does have some quality traits. His rookie year wasn't horrible by any stretch of the imagination. And at the end of his rookie year, he was gaining favor of the Bills coaching staff. Last year, obviously a tremendous disappointment. And the Bills move on by getting James Cook. So obviously it's not likely that Zach Moss is going to have a significant role, but I think it's still a little premature to be completely done with him at this point. Not worth talking for 5 minutes on a podcast. We'll wait till he actually does something during the games, but just wanted to make an observation that he has had a decent camp to this point from those that are reporting closely.
It's interesting, too, because obviously you've Cook for 4 years, and what you can do here is maybe get Singletary at a decent rate to pair him up for maybe a couple of years together. So we'll see what this unit's able to do. But if they like what they see from this running back room, I wouldn't be shocked to see this ran back for a couple more years. So I'm interested to see how it all develops. I think Singletary proved down the stretch it's his job, but it won't take much for Cook to prove he can do a lot of things well. And if he can handle more carries than people think, James Cook could be the starting running back of this team as taken in the second round, which is higher than the other guys. So the team does have a really high opinion of him. 4 years under contract.
That would seem to be what they want, correct? I mean,
definitely next year.
You're hearing some of the national guys leak information, which they're being told this from either Cook's agent or from coaches on the Bills. You're hearing things getting leaked like they see some of his brother in him. They see some Dalvin Cook in James Cook, and that he's a little smaller, but that they think he has a gear that maybe wasn't appreciated during the college draft process. Maybe he was underutilized at Georgia because he was at a national championship school that just has 5-star recruits left and right. So if that's the Bills' belief, as some would make it seem, maybe they do have bigger plans going forward than just be a pass catcher and the occasional carry. Maybe they do believe he could be an all-around, potentially star back in the future.
I don't see why not. Like, I think that there's an all-around player to be had, and I don't think he's just a gadget guy only or here and there kind of guy. I do believe they do have visions of a second-round running back being very much a second-round running back. We've seen enough comparisons to similar players. Like you saw what Gibson was able to do in Washington. I think that that's kind of what you're thinking here. From real quickly, Gibson was supposed to be the guy, backup guy, to being like their real guy pretty quickly. And I think that that's the vision of James Cook. I really do believe that. And then having Singletary as, able to do a couple things in the game as well. That's kind of my plan. I don't even want to see a third running back active on game day. Roster one, go ahead. Tywan Jones is obviously a special teamer, but that's kind of my running back room. And we'll see if my mind changes on if it's Duke Johnson or if it's Zach Moss that wins that. I'll let you know very quickly after the scrimmage. And then as we go into preseason games, by mid to late August, I'll be pretty convicted on what I'd like my running back room to look like. And to see if Zach Moss can do enough to be like, yeah, fine, I'll take him over Duke Johnson and Raheem Blackshear, who I actually really like. If one of my, it's fantasy football season, Mike, and it's one of my favorite things to do is play some fantasy football. I love it. And Underdog Fantasy is a proud sponsor of Cover One. They'll match up to $100 on your first deposit. Use promo code Cover One. It's super fun. It's not like any of your traditional sites out there. You go on, you do a season-long league. You can go ahead and bet on that, and it's super fun to do. Like, it's not like anything else you've ever seen. You just play some fantasy. You can join different leagues. We have a bunch already rocking. We have multiple Cover One ones. It's just completely fun. And it's one of like the most dynamic names in fantasy football. It really is. It's not like your traditional ESPN or Yahoo. I think it does a lot of things well. They even do a best ball mania where they're going to pick a couple millionaires based on who does the best out of those. So go ahead and get in there now using promo code COVER1 to match up to $100 of free play with your promo code COVER1. So get out there and try it. It's a great supplement to all those fantasy leagues. When you're like, I don't know if I want a third fantasy league. Seriously, give Underdog Fantasy a try. It's not what you think. It's really cool. And it's kind of like a season league all in one. So give that a shot. Mike. Oh man, Mike. We got just there's so many topics in such little time.
Hey, we got to talk about a couple more offensive positions.
I know. I didn't want you to talk about Zach Moss for 47 minutes, but
I do want to talk about the wide receiver battle a little bit. But one thing I did want to talk about also is OJ Howard. It felt, or at least it feels like to me, that many in the local media, maybe even Bills Mafia, are feeling a bit underwhelmed by OJ Howard so far during camp. And I understand he has not been impressive by any standard to this point, but I also don't think he's been horrible either. But it is kind of caught me by surprise how many people have been hard on him to this point. Don't know if that's some groupthink or if that's expectations being too high. Obviously, when you hear the name OJ Howard, you think about how dynamic he was at Alabama, being a first-round pick, all the potential when he was drafted by Tampa Bay. And I think the toughest thing to accept is that OJ Howard is not the guy that everyone wanted him to be coming out of college.
Right.
But I don't think OJ Howard is a bad football player either. We've been talking all offseason about how the Bills are probably going to do more two tight end formations this year. I still stand by that. I think they will do more two tight end formations this year. And I do think OJ Howard is a substantial upgrade over what they had at backup tight end last year. One of the conversations that has been on Twitter that I've seen some people post, though, is why would you put OJ Howard on the field when he's just a guy, when you could have a more dynamic wideout or someone else in the game? And I think the conversation goes a little bit deeper than just that on the surface. When we're talking more two tight end formation, and Greg Thompson will go through this stuff for days, we're talking about maybe they'll do it 5%, 10% more. Just having the ability to throw it out there in certain circumstances. Mm-hmm. You can even do it for matchups to get certain personnel on the field to defend you. That can set up advantages. Yes, OJ Howard might not be the greatest player. He might not even be the one that takes advantage of the defense. But if it sets something else up for your offense, that is a positive, a net positive for you at the end of the day. And I don't know if people thought that OJ Howard was going to come to the Bills and be some 40 reception tight end. I don't feel like I ever believed that. But if he gets 15, 20 receptions, Knox gets his 50, I think I'm okay with that as long as he doesn't end up being a detriment to the team. One of the comments here, he might get 15% of the snaps all year, block and catch the ball. That's all I'm really expecting. I'm not expecting a monster year. I'm just wondering, Kev, do you agree with that? And do you think that maybe some people are a little guilty of thinking he was going to have a more defined role than what he really will have on this team?
Yeah, I don't know if people were thinking that there'd be this monster two tight end situation.
Like, I'm happy he's a Bill. Like, I'm happy he's on the team.
Right. And like, he's getting paid. Like, also, let's be honest. Like, if something happens to your only tight end on their roster in Dawson Knox, you're in trouble. The Bills straight up didn't even really want to roster a second tight end last year. Now they have a guy where they can feel pretty comfortable stepping in from day one. And now if he's the premier tight end in the offense, let's say something happens to Knox and you need him and you still have that talent at wide receiver and running back and all costs of weapons, you're not going to put any assets or you're not going to allocate any type of defensive coverage to OJ Howard. He's going to be a complete asset for this team if needed. And that's what he is. He's an insurance policy. He's a number 2 tight end and a good one at that. Is he the number 15 ranked overall tight end? No. But that's not. That also gets paid $50-60 million right now in the NFL. He's making $3 million. So quite frankly, you can do different situational things with him. It might help you so that you don't have to roster some big body wide receiver when you might need to use that position elsewhere. You might need to use that roster spot at cornerback. So you might need to use that roster spot at a different receiver on the roster that you're trying to stash or keep, and Tavon Austin or Stevenson or Isaiah Hodgins or something that you want to do, but not have to be like, I have to roster a certain type of player. OJ Howard should satisfy that. He should satisfy your red zone target. He should satisfy your second tight end. He should satisfy your insurance at the tight end position just in general. That's what you're getting from him. You're not getting 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. I still don't even think that's out. Say Knox went down tomorrow, which, pray that doesn't happen. But if it does, I don't know that that's super outlandish. I think that he has it in him, but that's not what you're expecting. You're not expecting that kind of thing. And at times, like the Bills just straight up, there were games they did not have a second tight end active. And they're like, what offensive lineman? It might be Tommy Doyle. Like it could be anybody at times to line up and be the second tight end in certain situations.
And that was a big weakness because they didn't have a second tight end they had any confidence in. They were one-dimensional at times. People, we talk about the Bills offense last year like they were dynamic. And yes, at the end of the year, they were unstoppable. There were some growing pains during last year where they struggled. And this team is every offseason move that they made, offense and defense, was about getting more balanced overall. And OJ Howard, just another guy that fits that description, adding balance to this team. Not a star, but he's improving your team in ways that often go beyond the box score.
Absolutely. And that's really all that matters to me, is that OJ Howard's going to add some dynamic competitive behavior at times. I think that there's going to be times in the season, don't know if it's week 1 or week 14, that you're going to say, yeah, I want to see some more of that. And you might not see more of that, but I think that that's what you're going to say to yourself, because I do think he'll show you some splash plays that reminds you of those days at Alabama, or reminds you of those days of like, yeah, that's why the Bills use him as a tight end too. I think you'll see that. And he does add a usable tight end, which they didn't have if something happens to Knox. So, and we've seen some good stuff. I think, I mean, Sweeney's finally probably back in the fold and able to be a tight end 3. So we'll see what they're able to do. I just don't know what we're going to get out of anything behind him. He's even been asked offensively about Quentin Morris, Ken Dorsey, that is, and just was kind of like, yeah, he's a guy. We like him. He's a guy. Jalen Watermeyer too is had really good numbers and played pretty well, but just one of the worst testing players ever.
And really hasn't done a ton during camp. No. I mean, that's one of those classic, you hype him up as a UDFA, but you're really just grasping at straws. I mean, maybe he has a chance practice squad, but Weidemeyer really hasn't done much from
Ken Lee Platty just came out and said, we've never in the history of the score had a player like that go and do anything. I don't know. At some point, you got to take that seriously. There are outliers, and like, yeah, maybe we found that outlier. Just like that's the same thing people do with Josh Allen. Like maybe we found, maybe Daniel Jones is Josh Allen, etc. But at some point, the numbers don't lie. Like his testing doesn't lie, and he's going to be a backup at best in this league. And that's if he can even figure out a way onto the practice squad, which is where he's destined right now. And I would like to see the Bills at least put him there to at least see if they can't get any of that untapped potential up to be like a backup tight end, if needed in an injury presence. So talking about weapons, though, we talked about the tight end weapons, talking about the receiver position. And what a battle going on there. Isaiah McKenzie's looking like every bit the part of a slot receiver, every bit the part of a true number 3, really taking a job that coming in a month ago, not many of us were saying he's going to be a pivotal. He's going to do his Isaiah McKenzie thing, but not everybody was saying he's going to be a pivotal part. We're all overshadowed the New England game, the Miami game, just nothing like really that consistent, but he's showing the part to be having every ounce of trust with Josh Allen. That 2-year, $4.4 million deal looks pretty good out of a slot receiver right now for what they can get paid. And just that room in general between, I mean, what can we say about Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis? Like, there's just not, they're going to be good. Like, we're not going to sit here and belabor that, but they're going to be good. Like, those are one of the best number 1s and what could be developing into one of the best number 2 receivers in the NFL. And then you add in a developing, like McKenzie, still fairly young. He's still, 27. And then Khalil Shakir, he's had really, really good days. I read he had one bad day so far, but he's a rookie. But he's been really good in big stretches. The team likes what they see from Tavon Austin at times. Jamison Crowder is still there, a guy that I'm still not super confident on until he gets going. So we'll see. Mike, what's your opinion on this receiver room?
Yeah, we've been talking about the slot wide receiver battle for the last couple of weeks, and obviously that's turned out to be one of the storylines of training camp to this point. Isaiah McKenzie's taking advantage of his opportunity. That's all you can really say. There's questions going in. Was there a battle? Were fans overly excited about Isaiah McKenzie? Obviously, people have been pumping him up due to some big games he's had when given opportunities in recent years. But almost all of us at Cover One would have told you Jamison Crowder had that slot position pretty much, I wouldn't say locked up, but we all thought it was his position to lose. And unfortunately for him, he hasn't been available for much of camp to this point. And Isaiah McKenzie is stepping up. When I was at practice on Saturday, he ended the day with an impressive touchdown grab in the back of the end zone. Josh Allen obviously has a rapport with him. They have continuity, and McKenzie has that advantage of being part of this organization for, I believe, 3 years now. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. Maybe 3.5, something like that. And obviously, he's taken advantage of that. He has grown a ton as a wideout, playing next to guys like Cole Beasley, one of the best slot guys in the NFL over the last 5 years, has been a huge advantage. It's clear that Isaiah has learned from Cole and is taking a step forward and trying to lock down that 3 spot, which would be a tremendous boost to his career. That's something that changes the way you're remembered. Obviously, Bills fans are fond of him because of his role as a gadget player, a returner at times, and he has a fun personality that is endearing to fans. But if he ends up getting this number 3 wideout spot, you're going to start seeing Isaiah McKenzie pull down 50-plus catches on a winning Bills team at this age, being part of this franchise going forward. That's how you become a player that the fans love and remember. So really excited for him, but we are still only a week and a few days into Bills camp. A lot can change between now and September 8th. Jamison Crowder I definitely want to see what he's going to do out on the field with more opportunities. It's going to be interesting. These preseason games, you normally don't want to put too much into, but it will be interesting to see how Isaiah compares to Crowder, and if either one of them gets a little bit of an edge from that opportunity. Behind him, you've been talking Shakir. I've been talking to Shakir. He looks the real deal. He's probably not going to have much of an opportunity this year, but I am super excited about the potential he has long-term on this team. Tavon Austin, I'll be real. I've talked about it. I don't know if he has a spot on this roster. I really don't see him excelling at a high level for the most part. Yes, he has an occasional nice play in practice where he beats a backup, but you're not seeing him really getting a ton of opportunities with the ones and getting to really show off that skill set. So we'll see if Tavon ends up making the team or not. But that Crowder-McKenzie battle, like I said, right now, edge McKenzie, credit to him, but we'll see how it plays out. Still a lot of time. Would love to see Crowder play his way back into the competition.
Do you think he does? Do you think he does play his way back into the competition? Straight up.
I mean, it's possible. It doesn't seem likely at this point, but it's hard to say. A lot can happen. Isaiah, injuries happen. Something could happen to Isaiah McKenzie. Something could happen to somebody else. What I struggle with is all of the past would indicate that Jamison Crowder is the better wideout when you compare him to McKenzie, but he's done it on bad teams. So he did it in Washington. He did it in New York. Isaiah has been with the Bills lower on the depth chart behind quality players that entire time. Is that an indicator that Isaiah didn't have the talent, or was he learning and developing that entire time? McDermott's always going to give the person that's been on the franchise that has that continuity a little bit of a step up at the beginning of camp. I really wish that Crowder was healthy from the get-go, because right now you're talking about someone that's having a great camp versus someone that hasn't even been available. It's not really a fair competition at this moment in time, but that's how it rolls sometimes in the NFL. It's hard to see Crowder catching up, but I wouldn't rule it out.
With no special teams, the special teams that you're hoping to get out of maybe Stevenson or maybe, Shakir, with him not playing special teams, do you keep him on the roster as the fourth receiver?
I mean, talking to Greg and talking to Eric, the rest of the guys during the beginning of camp, they didn't seem to think it was likely Crowder could get cut regardless of what happens with the slot wide receiver battle. In both of them bring different facets as well. Why not? Just because you say one's your 3 and one's the 4, it doesn't mean that you can't rotate them and both give them significant reps. You don't need to have a Cole Beasley type slot guy where he's going to be your 3 almost every single time he's on the field. You can rotate them and fool around with things a little bit. So maybe the Bills go about it a little bit differently this year. Maybe when the season starts, they give them both a 50-50.
Oh, I hate splits. I just talked about that at running back.
I understand, but
I hate it at DN with Von Miller. I don't want it.
I know NFL is totally different than college, but you see that a lot in college for early in the year trying to lock jobs down. NFL, you normally see a job won at the end of camp going into the regular season. College, a lot of these battles continue into the first few weeks of the season. Maybe with something like this, we see this battle continue into maybe mid-September or late September and see who's really stepping up in real live game action, because you give the job to McKenzie and say first 30 weeks he's struggling, he's not getting separation, he's dropping balls. Are you going to just say, well, he won the job in camp, we're going to stick with him, or are you going to give Khalil
Shakir a shot in that situation?
Yeah, maybe give Khalil Shakir a shot. So regardless of the situation, I like the weapons 1 through 5. I obviously love options 1 and 2, and I think whoever they have as that wide receiver 3 in the slot will be serviceable. And I'm pretty confident either way, whether it be McKenzie or Crowder, and that's a good thing, because I think McKenzie has definitely elevated his stock on this team compared to where it was among fans at this point a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like, could one player be good against zone and McKenzie good man-to-man from Jessica? Like, yeah, I mean, it's very possible they could be leaning the same way in that. But I want to see that. I haven't seen it yet under this regime. They do seem to stick with their receivers that they do designate. I mean, it took, like, a look at Gabe Davis to really even get a shot at it till way late in the year. So I don't know. That's like one position that maybe Ken Dorsey has a different view than Brian Dable. But we'll have to see if there's any precedent there. But just like there wasn't really a big precedent on taking a corner early. But this regime took Trey White and then took Kyrie Elam.
It's just a unique battle because you're talking experience versus inexperience as far as like a actual role offensively. But the one guy has the continuity being in Buffalo, and the other guy's a newcomer. So what's going to matter more? And ultimately, I think it's going to be what do they show this month. Isaiah McKenzie clearly has the edge right now, but we're 1 week into camp. The month of August is going to decide who wins that job. We still have 3 preseason games. We have a month of practices. It feels over, but that's really premature to say. I like the comment. Maybe throw them against different coverages, see how they look, and that'll go a far way into determining how this all plays out.
And what also goes a long way to determining this is injuries. So, quite frankly, the Bills got started early. Obviously, they're going to start early in the season, but there's still over a month left. And if anything happens in the receiver room, they'll probably feel pretty good that they had some depth there at that unit and now able to work Shakir in or work in Crowder. Doesn't take much for something to happen at this unit, and it's a really important unit for Josh Allen. So if it's something real serious, I see the Bills probably need to make an address at this position. How about it? Well, we're talking about the receiver room. I do want to we're gonna throw this out there, Mike, because I want to throw a curveball here. How about the recruiting of Odell Beckham Jr. for late in the year?
Oh, dude. I love that you brought this up. I totally forgot that this was something that was a topic of discussion over the weekend, and I'm glad you brought this up. I love it. I love it. You know,
I'd sign him today, even if he plays 4 games. I'd sign him today.
100%. I don't. If he's able to play football in like January, February, if you know you can even get a regular season game out of him, 2 regular season games, I'm all for it. We saw in limited action last year how dynamic he can be at this point in his career. He can still light it up. Obviously, a lot is dependent on his timetable for recovery. Tearing the ACL during the Super Bowl, it's not going to be early, but this guy is unlimited talent. You add him to a receiver room with Diggs, Davis, McKenzie, Crowder. You have Odell Beckham as your 3 or your 4 man. Good luck stopping that. And not even worried about any chemistry concerns. I'm not worried about him being a diva. I think when he was younger, earlier in his career in New York, yes, he dealt with some issues on and off the field, seek the attention. New York might not have been the best start for his career, the best place for him to start. Cleveland obviously didn't go great. But you saw in LA, you put him in a winning environment, good culture. He can fit in. Von Miller and him, close friends. The reason the Bills generate the culture they do is so that they can take risks on guys like OBJ when the circumstances present themselves. You don't generate a great culture to avoid bringing on good talent that might be a little bit risky. You generate the culture so you bring them in and you believe you're the cure to have them be their best version of themselves. So I love the idea. I don't think fans should be scared of it. Because if it didn't work out and if he was a cancer and if he decided to be a diva, the Bills just cut ties and you move on. I understand a lot of fans don't like the type of personality he is, but he played a big role in the Rams winning that Super Bowl last year. And if he didn't get hurt, he probably would have been the odds-on favorite to be the Super Bowl MVP with how he was performing.
And he's got to want to play his few games. If he's going to pick someone to play his 5 games with, 6 games with, 4 games with, it's Josh Allen's at the top of that list. Close with Von Miller. He tried to get Von to stay in LA. I think there's some
Antonio Brown. We can all act like, oh, he's a diva. Oh, he's a locker room cancer. Well, the same things could have been said about Stephon Diggs before the Bills acquired him.
Absolutely.
And you know what? The Bills did try to acquire Antonio Brown, even when they knew he was a cancer in the Pittsburgh locker room.
Bean loves himself a receiver.
Brandon Bean doesn't care. And even the Patriots with Belichick, when they were talking about the Patriot way, they tried to get guys like Chad Johnson, Chad Ochocinco. They got Albert Hainsworth, Randy Moss. The list of guys the Patriots signed over the years that were considered complete divas was insane. But you know what? They believed in their staff. They believed in their culture. And they believed we'll make you perform well. And you'll either follow the way we run things here or you're gone. And there's nothing you can lose in that situation. Odell Beckham would not destroy the Bills locker room. He would be a plus in terms of talent. I'm all for it. And Andre Reed recruiting him, I love it. And just to be fair, I don't think anything is imminent. My opinion is, and what I've been reading, has been that teams know that OBJ is going to be out for at least 3/4 of the season. No one is in a rush to sign him at the current moment. They're waiting till he's healthy enough to pass a physical, and then he's going to find someone.
But how crazy is OBJ watch going to be? Because, I don't know, nothing's really interesting to me about this post. Like them, hanging out, taking a photo is cool. It's Gucci. But let's just say we had a good convo last night. I don't know. You don't need to add that to me. That's actually Odell would come here. And to be honest, if the Bills had an injury, he's absolutely at the forefront of who they're calling.
I think OBJ would come to Buffalo.
Especially in a 5-week stretch.
It's a different situation than what it would have been 3-4 years ago. He went to a situation like LA where he had to be a lower guy in the depth chart, not the primary focus. He has swallowed his ego. Obviously, in Cleveland, he wasn't happy about that situation. And I don't think even Buffalo would be a big deal to him coming to Buffalo. Some people are saying, well, he's a big city wide receiver. You know what? If he's coming to a team to play 3-4 regular season games, he's going to a team that he can go on a playoff run and win a Super Bowl. He has his Von Miller's close friends with him. Von could even go up to him and be like, hey, man, come to Buffalo. You'll be here for like 3-4 months. We got a good culture. Let's try to win a ring. And then go to free agency and get your money if someone's willing to pay you. I don't think OBJ would be an expensive contract. I think he'd be a cheap minimum type deal. And I do agree with some of the stuff. Obviously, there's other positions that are more important. Yes, we understand that. The offensive line, there's a ton of different positions on this Bills roster that are higher priorities than wide receiver, especially when you're talking about a diva like OBJ. But all I'm saying is this is in the news because Andre Reed was talking to him, and it was honestly an idea that I've been thinking that the Bills might entertain long before Andre Reed was talking to him. I do find it interesting sometimes when you have these Bills legends talking to other NFL great players that are free agents or on the trade block. Sometimes it's just noise where it's nothing legitimate. It's just Andre Reed or Jim Kelly or Thurman talking to a guy, having some fun, trying to ruffle some feathers. But sometimes it is the Bills trying to be like, hey, can you gauge to see if he has some interest? Like, would he consider this? And like I said earlier, Brandon Beane loves talented wide receivers. I have no doubt in my mind if OBJ is healthy in November, ready to go, he's willing to take a minimum contract and wants to go to a contender, Brandon Beane is going to reach out to him, and he's going to see what will it take to get you. No way Brandon Beane just shuts the door to that automatically. He's going to at least put a flyer. Brandon Beane does not say no to anyone just because. He's going to look at every situation and see, can this improve my team? If it can, I'm going to look into it.
I mean, I think receiver is an extremely important position, especially right now. Like, I don't know what to say. Like to me, you can add that kind of talent. You add that talent. I don't think it's like in a vacuum. You look at it like, what wouldn't he do for my roster? Like, you need to upgrade O-line. They're not mutually exclusive. When has Brandon Beane made anything mutually exclusive of like, yeah, but if we add Odell Beckham Jr., we're not going to do anything on the interior offensive line. The Bills feel good about they're not playing right now. Like, your starting unit, and now if it's a serious injury to someone and you're not expecting Saffold back or Bates back, fine. But as of right now, the expectation is the starting unit's ready ASAP, and you're adding a premier talent at the receiver position.
And how do you stop him?
He literally won the Super Bowl. He was the part of the reason the team won the Super Bowl last year. So I don't understand they're not going to win. Like these guys don't help win a Super Bowl. He's literally the reason they won. Not to mention great plays across Super Bowl history in terms of like Santana Moss and Santana Holmes and just other players across the league that have played really good in Super Bowls because of like receiver play. Like, I don't know. It's just something that you can add to it to when you're a passing team and your team is very talented and you need the final push to push you over the edge. How do you guard Odell Beckham Jr., Gabriel Davis?
We named one of our shows Never Too Many Weapons. Going into the draft, we were totally cool if a Jameson Williams or an Olave came to the Bills. And yes, they got Shakir. But why wouldn't we, before Odell Beckham Jr., assuming he was healthy enough to make an impact and be the premier player that he was, if he's willing to be humble and accept the role? Like, obviously, there's some chemistry concerns. Obviously, you're trying to figure out how he would fit in with your team. But if you're looking at a Bills roster in January with a healthy Odell Beckham Jr., and I know this is all a hypothetical dream at this point, so don't go out thinking like, oh, Mike's saying the Bills are going to sign OBJ, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I would be interested in it. But if you're talking about like it's divisional Sunday, Bills are hosting the Cincinnati Bengals or the Baltimore Ravens, whoever, the Chargers, Josh Allen at quarterback. You got Cook or Singletary in the backfield. You got your starting offensive line. And then you got out wide, you have Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Odell Beckham Jr., and then you're
Greg Jennings.
Throw McKenzie as your 4. How are you stopping that? You're not. Like Odell Beckham Jr. against your number 3 corner. Like I understand why there's hesitancy. Like his pass, there's a lot of things that like are red flags. But you know what? He just did it last year, and he helped a team win a ring. If he's willing to do it for you, why be opposed to it? And we'll have a better understanding of the situation when it comes to be November. We'll see if he's healthy. We'll see if he's willing to take less money. Who knows? Maybe the Bills aren't even a consideration for him at that point in time. Why ever try to limit how good you can be? If you have a guy out there that can make you even a little bit better, you go for it. And it's not that I don't have faith. I already think the Bills are the Super Bowl favorites at this point already. But I'm just saying, if you got your starting 3 wide receivers, Davis, Diggs, OBJ, oh my goodness. Like, no one is stopping that. No one.
Yeah, I agree with that. And why not both? Why can't you have Darrell Williams is going to cost you nothing right now? It's a matter of just how it gets done. There's never too many weapons. The first thing people will be asking for if someone goes down is like get Odell Beckham Jr. And what's going to be funny is that like very quickly at week 8, when there's like an OBJ competition and it's going to be down to KC, LA, and Buffalo, real quickly we'll see the mindset change a little bit on when everyone else wants something, you do too. I call it FOMO. You can call it whatever you want, but you're not going to want to watch KC or another team you're competing with, Cincinnati. Could be really.
Yeah, you're 100%. And you know what? The one thing I love the most about Brandon Beane, he doesn't care about the traditional way of building a team.
No.
He doesn't care. Like when the Bills signed John Brown and Cole Beasley back to back, people are like, why did you sign both of them? Why did you need 2 wide receivers? Because 2 is better than 1. And you know what? When you have a chance to have more good players, why limit yourself at a certain point? Yeah, if you have a great offensive line, you don't need to continue building 5 million great starters behind those guys. But it's a receiver room that isn't the top receiver in the room in the NFL. The Bills have good weapons, but their weapons aren't top 5 in the NFL. Some would argue they're not even top 10 in the NFL. The Bills, what makes the Bills great is they have an elite quarterback. They have a guy like Von Miller, who's one of the best edge rushers of all time. And you have strong, above average players scattered throughout your roster. But how many truly elite players do they have outside of Josh Allen, Von Miller, Stephon Diggs? Maybe you put Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Ed Oliver at that, Trey White at that. And like, yes, those are elite players. But you go beyond the Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Von Miller, those guys are all a tier below the top 3. The Bills are good because they have talent scattered throughout their roster. Just continue to build. Continue going at it.
We just spent the first part of the show talking about the defense wins championships. A lot of people are like, well, this team didn't win. That team didn't win. We'll talk about O-line all day. Green Bay never had literally ever had an offensive line. Pittsburgh never had an offensive line. Ben Roethlisberger gets sacked, more than anybody when those Super Bowl years. You can really do that anywhere, but where you can't do that, the Giants winning the Super Bowl with the D-line. Literally the best unit on that team was the D-line, and that's pretty much the only thing they had that was above good to great. So the Bills have that. So quite frankly, like if you're going to say, Kevin, go get D Ford, if that's really who you want, fine. Like if you want to add another pass rusher to the mix, a player like that, all right. But to me, the best take to me is defense wins championships. The Bills have that defense. Why not hedge your bet and throw in another receiver? The Bills have that defense. It's not like we're sitting here like, Mike, we don't have pass rushers.
And I don't know the economic terms, so I'm probably going to screw this up. I don't know if it's opportunity.
Give me some sabermetrics, Mike.
I don't know if this is opportunity cost or what the heck I'm about to say, but I did get an A in economics in college, so that means something. So if your process in late November is keep the team the way it is, or for a slight cost that you can afford under the cap, you add a guy that's been a top 10 wide receiver in football, and then all that the cost is the minimal salary you'll pay him, and then the bottom guy on your roster who is barely playing, barely seeing the field, getting scratched half the time. What are you really giving up by adding an OBJ in that opportunity? See, I think it's easy for people to just say, no, don't do it. It's going to cause all these problems and like it's going to get in the way. But what is the actual cost? And I'm not talking the salary. I'm not talking anything else. There is no actual cost. That's what I'm trying to tell people. Like, say to people, like, don't say no before exploring the possibility. Like, you bring him into the office, you find out, like, oh, he wants to get 50% of the targets. He wants to take away balls from Stephon Diggs. Well, then you don't sign him. But that's why you go through the whole, hey, do you want to come to Buffalo? Are you cool with being like the third or fourth wide receiver? Are you trying to win a Super Bowl? Or are you trying to get your money for next year? Brandon Beane knows how this works. That's why he takes out these flyers. Brandon Beane wanted Antonio Brown. Like, let's be real. Like, the Bills are not run by guys that are like, oh, we just want goody two-shoes. No, they want talent. They're willing to do whatever it takes to win the Super Bowl. The only difference between the way Buffalo does it and the way other teams do it is that a lot of the way they share their message with fans, they talk about culture and they build it and they maintain it from within. That's why Stephon Diggs has worked out so great in Buffalo, because they maintain it. They actually follow through with their words. But if Stephon Diggs was traded to the New York Giants, do you think that we'd be hearing about how great Stephon is as a teammate, how he's emerging as a leader, and how he cares so much about winning and interacting with fans? No, we would probably be hearing about Stephon Diggs being pissed that he's on a 6-11 team, not getting enough footballs thrown to him, and that he's tired of missing the postseason. Like, the management knows that.
Right. Like, I think that the difference here is, like, there's been no top 10 teams single season scoring offenses since 1970. I guess the answer is 0 to win the Super Bowl. But I don't know what you're advocating for. Are you advocating for that offense
like, do you not
doesn't win the Super Bowl? I don't know. I would have to dive into more of that advanced analytics on that stat to see like exactly what that stat means. Offenses generally win football games, just generally. Now, can it be stopped by a good defense? What did we spend 45 minutes today talking about? How good the defensive line was, to the point where you had to sit down at Oliver out of plays because we couldn't run offensive plays. The Bills have that defensive side of the ball. How you can hedge your bet, how you can get into positioning to be in a position to have home field advantage. Offenses get you in position to win games, into position to win a Super Bowl. It doesn't necessarily mean that because you have the number 1 overall offense, you're going to win the Super Bowl. Clearly, I guess based on the top 10 single scoring offenses, it hasn't happened. But I want to look at how many teams that had the best offense that season won the Super Bowl. That'd be an interesting statistic to me, not top 10 overall. Like, I want to see how many had been number 1 overall in offense in certain offensive categories and see which ones translate more than others. Maybe points doesn't, maybe yards translates, maybe yards doesn't. I want to look through some of those stats, and I might do it now because I'm interested. It's a
combination of everything. You can't just look at one single stat and say, this is why. It's a combination of everything. And then even situations inside of games, situations inside of situations. And the final thing I'll say,
third down offense, turnovers.
Yeah, the final thing I'll say about it, like, I'm not expecting OBJ to be a Buffalo Bill. This is all hypothetical thought exercise. That's just something that's fun to go over and talk about during camp. We'll see if it even has a 10% chance of happening later in the season. But what I will tell you is Brandon Beane isn't afraid of being aggressive, and I think he took a lesson from what the LA Rams did last year. They went all in. They put all their chips in to go win a Super Bowl. And you know what? In the past, that logic has always been frowned upon. It's been considered poor, stupid, because you're potentially giving up the long-term future for one opportunity to win the Super Bowl. Well, you know how you get remembered? You get remembered by winning the Super Bowl, not by making the playoffs 10 years straight and falling in the divisional round or the AFC Championship. And yes, Bills Mafia, we would love just to get to another AFC Championship. We'd love to just get to the Super Bowl. But you know what? The great teams, even as the ones as great as the Bills in the 90s, unfortunately, the rest of the country frowns on them because they never won the big one.
Right.
And that's what Brandon Beane is going after. He got Von Miller because he paid big time cash to get Von Miller. He did what he wasn't able to do last year at the trade deadline. He wanted Von Miller. You always hear, oh, the Bills wanted Von Miller. They didn't get him. Well, the team that did get Von Miller won the Super Bowl. That team that won the Super Bowl also went after OBJ midseason.
The Rams put it all on its head last year in terms of what to do.
The Bills aren't giving Von Miller a 6-year, $120 million contract, even if he's never going to see all that money and probably only be here for 3 years. They didn't give him all of that money to not put all their eggs in the basket. They are going all in. If an opportunity to improve the team presents itself, I don't care if it's September, November, December, whenever. They're going to do what they need to do to improve the team. If they don't think OBJ improves the team at that point in time, well, then he won't be a Buffalo Bill. But if they think that he can help the roster in even the slightest amount, they will go for it. And that's my belief. And believe me, I love all the comments from you guys. I actually do love a lot of you guys playing devil's advocate with us because it is good hearing differing viewpoints. And me and Kevin, we're never going to be the people that are going to come in our podcast and tell people that have differing viewpoints that we think they're dumb or that they're wrong. Because a lot of times I'm the person that's wrong. Kevin might be wrong. And we get smarter by sharing these different opinions. So I do respect everything that you guys are stating. OBJ could be an issue, and there could be a lot of other things that could pop up as a result of him. Just an interesting conversation. Like I said, probably not likely, but in Jessica, good point. How many of the top flight wide receiving cores New England had actually won the Super Bowl? That's fair. When they had Moss, when they had Welker, they didn't. But I would counter that with they didn't not win the Super Bowl because they had elite wide receivers. They didn't win the Super Bowl in some of those years, sometimes due to luck, sometimes due to unfortunate circumstances. Like when they go
because they didn't run the ball on the goal line.
When they're 18-0 going into a Super Bowl against the Giants and they lose that, I'm not going to look at the wide receiving core that had some of the most talented wideouts any team in the NFL history has had and be like, oh, well, they lost because they had an elite wide receiving core. No, they lost because in the biggest moment of the season, they didn't perform.
Correct. And some dude caught a ball on his head. Let's be honest.
Like things happen. Like you could say, well, how many teams with diva wide receivers won the Super Bowl? Well, it depends what you consider a diva. Is Tyreek Hill a diva? Because Kansas City won a Super Bowl with Tyreek Hill. Like you need talent. That it's as simple as that. Like you could have the greatest team in football and you still enter a year with only a 10% chance of winning a Super Bowl. So the truth of it is you have 32 teams in the NFL. The odds of you ever winning the Super Bowl, the odds of getting to an AFC championship, much less 4 consecutive years like what the Chiefs just did, is astronomically small. You need a lot to go in your favor. You need situations to go in your favor. You need injuries to go in your favor. You need luck to go in your favor. One-score games to go in your favor. And then you factor all this in. What's the best way to try to control those? It's by having the greatest collection of talent possible combined with a culture that can battle through adversity, battle through the tough times, and stick together as a unit. And I think that's what the Bills have here. So we'll see. Not to continue this forever, but I'm for it. But I can see both sides to it.
That's interesting. Just like, would you play the game? Would you trade Josh Allen tomorrow, or excuse me, at the end of the year, if that means you get a Super Bowl in? Would you trade him in?
No.
You'd risk one Super Bowl for okay. All right.
I want more than one. We have This is the best quarterback to have ever played for the Buffalo Bills.
Okay.
I know people that are older than me that watch Jim Kelly would say Kelly was the greatest, and Kelly was great, no doubt. Like watching the 90s, 80s, Kelly's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But Kelly had that grit, and you talk about stacked rosters, like this current Bills roster is stacked, but those 90s teams might put this Bills roster to shame in some regards. with just the all-around talent they had throughout those rosters. But Josh Allen can do – he's the most talented, gifted quarterback to ever play in this organization.
Mm-hmm.
You're telling me we have him for another decade? I don't want to settle for one. And if they end up not winning one, that's a risk I would be willing to take in that hypothetical. But this is a team I expect to be in the Super Bowl at least multiple times in the next decade. I think anything less would be a severe disappointment. I know the AFC is loaded with quarterbacks, and that won't make it easy. But Josh Allen is a freak, and I expect to be watching the Bills in the Super Bowl multiple times in the next decade. Even a guy like Peyton Manning, who didn't really get it going with the Colts, ended up playing in 4 Super Bowls and winning 2. So I would hope Allen would get to at least a few.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Mike Bunt telling us, hot take Mike, bringing us the news, the nuggets, everything he's got for his opinions on OBJ, a much needed. We extended this show, guys, to talk about OBJ, to talk about the offense. I'm going to bring you some. I'm going to spend my week doing some research on offensive teams. I want to research this a little bit to see if what this means and what different receiver rooms have looked like and how that has all played a role into this development, because quite frankly, we'll see if there's any actual data around how good a receiver room isn't. That means that their team's good. So I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think it's because you have a good receiver means you can't not have an interior offensive lineman. I don't, especially when assets aren't involved. You have McKenzie making nothing. You have Gabriel Davis making nothing. You have Jamison Crowder making nothing and Khalil Shakir making nothing. There's no asset allocation there that shows that you can't.
Like, not all stats are connected. Like,
correct.
You could look at the Bills' record in 1-score games last year.
Correlation isn't causation.
Yeah, and you could make the correlation. Well, the Bills can't win close games. Well, last year they didn't, but that doesn't mean they couldn't. Just didn't happen. This year, if the Bills are in a 1-score game, week 1, week 2, I'm not going to have the game on in the fourth quarter with 3 minutes to go, just assuming, oh my God, they were winless in 1-score games last year. They're going to lose this game. Some stats they don't tell a full story. And we'll see. Definitely look into that, Kevin. Maybe we can add more to that
the end of next show we'll bring up a Super Bowl offense segment, like maybe for about 8 to 10 minutes. I'm gonna read some stuff off and see where we're at with the debate of, like, what does it mean to have a good receiving core? What are these examples? And, like, how can you help hedge your bet against a defense that we spent a lot of time on today about how good the DBs have been, how many assets they need to keep there because they're not sure if someone's going to get claimed. What are they going to do at the D-line position? Who's going to make it out of that rotation? Just so much good defensive stuff. And that's not even to talk about, like, the battle of how good Terrell Bernard's been or how good, Dodson's been as a 3rd, 4th linebacker. There's just so much good that we didn't even have last year. Like, I'm sorry, the backup linebacking play last year wasn't good. I think that this year could take a step up. Terrell Bernard could be a nice piece. We've seen some nice plays out of Terrell Bernard. Could be another gem. He's a gem. He could be a nice gem that can play multiple positions. I mean,
the problem with Bernard is this, as far as this year, it's kind of the same thing with Shakir. Just the final thoughts before wrapping up.
He's blocked.
In order for Shakir to see the field, who is coming off the field? And it's the same thing with Bernard. How does Bernard actually get on the field? Well, you're probably taking Taron Johnson off, and you're going to have Bernard in a more traditional defensive formation. So, God, it's something that Aaron always talks about. If you're putting Bernard on as a result of taking Taron Johnson off, then what positive does that really give you for this season? Yeah, especially when you got Milano, you got Emmons out there. But I will say, Bernard has been making plays in camp. He is a good cover linebacker, and he'll end up going from a draft pick that I think most of us at the time didn't really know much of to hopefully 2-3 years from now being a guy that we'll be looking back at and say he's a modern day NFL linebacker that has a multi.
How do we get him in the late 3rd?
Skill set. So
Yeah, how do we get that guy in the late third? Exactly. And maybe it's another one of those Brandon Bees, Gabriel Davis, or one of those late round gems, or mid round, really. One of those late of the mid round gems in Terrell Bernard. Going to be a real great player. Thanks, John. I really appreciate your thought provoking ideas as well. I actually didn't know that about the top 10 offenses in the league of what they were able to do. So I do want to dive into a little bit more and see what we can bring on the show next time. But there's just so much to get into, Mike. You're going to be at camp this weekend. You're going to be watching some things. Next show is going to be action-packed after that scrimmage, so please tune in here. We went 90 minutes for you guys today to kick off. We don't have a 9 p.m. show here today, so we wanted to at least kind of fill in some of that gap. So we really appreciate everybody tuning in, being part, lots to talk about. We only expect to have some great guests on, and they're going to come into this chat, guys. Like, I know the Jets people are like, when I bring on a Jets guest, they're going to come in this chat. I need you guys to bring this energy, but let's get them to, they're feeling good right now out of New York Jets land. So let's, I'm
the Dolphins fans are chanting, "Let's go Dolphins" during camp. Patriots fans are loving Mac Jones. You talk to all the rival fan bases, they are feeling good about their teams right now. That's how you know it's training camp, because come week 1, they're all going to be living in different realities, except for maybe Miami. I do think the Dolphins bring something to the table this year. And also, thanks, John. I know Kevin already thanks you, but always appreciate the support, and great chat room with everyone tonight. I love the conversation.
For sure. And we'll be back at you at our normal slot going forward, Tuesdays, 7 p.m., recapping guests, maybe some special previews if we need to do some Friday shows. We have some love for Friday here at the Going Deep podcast, but it's almost time. We're going to see some semi-real football this weekend and some even more real football on the 13th as we continue on this path to the regular season kickoff to the Rams, just over a month away, a month and a little bit of change. But from the Going Deep podcast, Kevin Messeri, Mike Bunt, and the Cover One Podcast Network, we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we'll catch you all next week right here, 7 p.m.
Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One Network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown. Play action.